Let's jump right into this explainer. Have you ever felt totally exhausted at the end of the day, even though you supposedly did everything right? Well, today we're looking at a pretty fascinating concept: why protecting your focus actually requires selective elimination, not just adding more and more habits to your plate.
We're going to do a complete audit of your life today. We'll start with the myth of adding more, explore 4 hidden psychological leaks: draining relationships, invisible decisions, open loops, and input overload, and then wrap up with a powerful strategy of elimination.
Section 1. The myth of adding more. Focus isn't built, it's protected.
Let me introduce you to Elena. She's 32, her calendar is completely packed, she's got a wide social circle, but she walks around with this low-grade exhaustion she just can't quite put her finger on. The thing is, she's not lazy at all, yet she can't seem to finish her own business idea because her energy is constantly leaking away before she can even apply it. Elena fell into a really classic trap. Society constantly tells us that success comes from adding things, right? Better habits, better routines, the newest productivity tools. She honestly believed that to achieve more, she needed to constantly be available to everyone and somehow just squeeze more into her already jam-packed day.
But here's where it gets interesting. Truly productive people aren't these master builders who are just endlessly stacking up new habits. They're actually ruthless editors. They actively cut out relationships, obligations, and inputs that just don't serve them anymore. And honestly, from the outside, it can look a little cold, but it's really the absolute highest form of self-respect.
Let's move to our first leak. Leak 1. Draining relationships. The unseen cost of fawning and obligation.
Take a look at this number. Maintaining relationships purely out of guilt or obligation doesn't just waste your time, it actively drains you. And it really comes down to a strict biological limit, 150. This is Dunbar's number from back in the 1990s. It essentially highlights that we humans can really only maintain around 150 stable relationships at any given time. And within that, only about 5 are truly close.
Which brings us to your social cognitive capacity. Think of it as the finite processing space in your brain that you use to track people's moods, manage their expectations, and just maintain relationships in general. Even a mildly draining relationship takes up a chunk of this processing space. Going back to our example, Elena had a friend who would always call late at night with endless drama, giving absolutely nothing in return. That friend was constantly withdrawing from Elena's extremely limited cognitive account.
And this isn't just exhausting, it's physically taxing. Julian Holt-Lundstad's 2010 research proved that these obligations aren't just neutral, they are actively harmful, carrying a measurable health cost. A lot of the time, staying in these connections is driven by a trauma response. Therapist Pete Walker calls it fawning, which is basically where we manage our anxiety by constantly appeasing other people. We literally perform safety by being overly available, and it costs us deeply.
On to Section 3. Leak 2. Invisible decisions. The quiet drain on your willpower. Now, relationships are really only half the equation here. We also have to contend with the hundreds of tiny, invisible choices we make every single day that act as a massive second leak on our energy. Let me ask you this. Why is it that the people with the clearest minds usually have the absolute most boring wardrobes? Seriously, think about it. What is the real cost of those mundane daily choices, like picking out an outfit or debating whether to answer a mildly annoying text message?
The answer lies in ego depletion. This is the theory that willpower functions exactly like a muscle. It gets fatigued and used up throughout the day by big decisions, sure, but also by tiny acts of restraint. Psychologist Roy Baumeister showed this perfectly in a famous 1998 experiment. He had people resist fresh-baked cookies in favor of radishes, and those people gave up on a puzzle way faster than the ones who got to eat the cookies. It shows that clear-minded people automate their mundane choices because they absolutely refuse to spend limited daily willpower on things that do not matter.
Section 4. Leak 3. Open loops. Unfinished business as a background hum.
This one is perhaps the sneakiest leak of them all, mostly because it doesn't even require your active attention to completely drain you. Have you ever sat down, ready to do some really deep work, and suddenly your brain goes, hey, what about that unanswered email? Or maybe you're randomly haunted by an unused gym subscription or an unresolved argument. Why do unanswered emails and half-finished projects haunt us exactly when we need to concentrate?
Well, it's called the Zygarnik effect, discovered by Soviet psychologist Bluma Zygarnik in the 1920s. She noticed that waiters could remember incredibly complex, unpaid orders perfectly, but they'd forget them the very second the bill was settled. Basically, our brains naturally remember uncompleted or interrupted tasks far better than finished ones. This means every single open loop in your life is running like a background process on a computer, quietly eating up your RAM and costing you precious attention every single day.
Section 5. Leak 4. Input overload. Renting out your working memory.
This is the leak most people mistakenly think they've already solved by simply trying to be a better multitasker. But multitasking is a total illusion here. 4 to 7. That is the estimated item limit of your working memory. Your mental workspace is actually incredibly small. That means every unnecessary notification, every news alert, every random ambient distraction actively degrades your capacity to hold the shape of a complex problem in your mind and actually think clearly.
So why do we keep all these inputs turned on? The source material shares the story of David, a scattered manager who subscribed to literally every newsletter and kept every alert pinging just because he wanted to stay in the loop. He couldn't focus on strategic tasks at all. This happens because of loss aversion, a principle identified by psychologists Kahneman and Tversky, where the pain of losing something feels much larger in our minds than the pleasure of gaining something equal. We keep useless newsletters pouring in purely out of FOMO, afraid that canceling them feels like a loss, even when reading them is what's actually costing us so much more.
Which brings us to our final section, the strategy of elimination, protecting your capacity for what actually matters.
The ultimate reframe you should take away here is that elimination isn't about being cold or antisocial. It is a deliberate, highly intelligent strategy to protect your finite, precious resources. The highest human need is the full use of one's own capacities, becoming everything one is capable of becoming. That's Abraham Maslow on self-actualization. And the harsh truth is you simply cannot reach self-actualization, you cannot become everything you're capable of becoming if your mental capacity is being involuntarily rationed out in tiny payments to things you never even actively chose.
So you can apply these 3 practical steps to your own life today to stop leaking energy. Step 1, audit your relationships for mutuality. If a connection is draining and completely one-sided, let it naturally fade. Step 2, shrink your decision space by automating those mundane choices. Eat the same breakfast, simplify the wardrobe. And step 3, close your open loops formally. Literally name the unfinished business in your mind, and then either finish it or consciously and formally let it go. Let's check back in on Elena's story. By using these steps, Elena let that draining one-sided friendship naturally fade. She unsubscribed from 14 newsletters in a single sitting. She automated her daily outfits. And you know what happened? She finally finished the first draft of her business idea. She didn't become a colder person. She literally just stopped paying rent on a mind she wasn't using for her true goals. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly important question for you to ponder. What are you quietly leaking energy to right now that you never actually chose in the first place? Take a moment, do the audit, and reclaim your mental clarity. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and until next time, take care of your mind.